As a practicing physician, I frequently speak with patients and viewers who are hesitant to take medical advice. They don't trust doctors, hospitals, or the healthcare system in general. They claim doctors are sheep. They think pharmaceutical companies are only interested in money. They believe government is not interested in bodily autonomy. And in some cases, to some degree, they may be correct. One area where I think we definitely need to do better is transparency, especially in owning up to our mistakes. Not just as a form of apology, but also to ensure that we're learning from them so they are not repeated. From hiding cures of preventable diseases, to giving children polio, to attempting to erase entire racial groups through lies and deceit. I'm a doctor, I believe in science, but I also believe in the truth, which includes acknowledging where medicine has made catastrophic mistakes. Huge thanks to Ground News for sponsoring this video. Have you ever heard of syphilis? There's a good chance you have, and there's a better chance that if you were to ever get it, you'd be able to treat it right away with a dose of penicillin available at any pharmacy with a prescription. And if you treat it early, it's really not that big of a deal. But it wasn't always this way. You see, syphilis is a bacterial infection most commonly transmitted through sex. It starts with a small sore called a canker at the site of infection, and if it's left untreated, the disease can worsen over time, causing rashes, hair loss, muscle aches, fever, and even sore throat. Now, if it gets to late stage syphilis, it can impact your nervous system, your heart, and even cause blindness. Eventually, it can kill you. So in 1932, the US Public Health Service began a study to research the long-term effects of syphilis. The goal was to record the natural progression of the disease when left untreated, but the study itself was wickedly evil. It enrolled 399 black men with syphilis and 201 uninfected black men to serve as controls. They offered men an annual free physical and other perks like meals, transportation, and burial insurance. For 600 poor black men in the South at the height of the Great Depression, this offer was too good to pass up. Unfortunately, the scientists did not tell the men the purpose behind their study. They did not tell them that they were testing them for syphilis, nor did they tell them if they tested positive. And in 1945, when CDC was recommending penicillin as a treatment for syphilis, the scientists didn't tell them that either. Their logic was that you can't study the long-term effects of syphilis if you cure your patients. Pretty dark and unethical. A whistleblower within the Public Health Service went to the press, and a story eventually ran on the front page of the New York Times. The public outcry was intense, and federal health officials ended the study in 1972 after 40 friggin' years. Of the original 399 men, reported figures say 28 died of syphilis, 100 died of syphilis-related complications, 40 of the men's wives had been infected, and 19 of the children were born with the disease. In 1974, the men and their families settled with the federal government for $10 million. In 1997, President Bill Clinton issued a formal presidential apology. In the late 1970s, we certified the global eradication of smallpox, ridding the world of a disease that had ravaged humanity for millennia. Unfortunately, a new threat emerged around the same time: AIDS. Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome begins as human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV. It attacks specific immune cells, making you more vulnerable to other infections and diseases. If left untreated, HIV can turn into AIDS, at which point the immune system gets so weak that you become highly susceptible to infections like tuberculosis, toxoplasmosis, and without treatment, people with AIDS typically only survive about 3 years. It's thought to have been transferred from chimpanzees to humans in Central Africa in the early 20th century, likely through hunting and butchering infected bushmeat. However, it wasn't truly recognized until the early 1980s when doctors began seeing these clusters of rare infections and cancers among previously healthy gay men, especially in Los Angeles, New York, and other major cities. While there is no cure yet for HIV or AIDS, we have developed treatments that can dramatically slow its spread and reduce its impact on the human body. But in the early years of the epidemic, those treatments either did not exist or were painfully limited. Critics argue that those delays were made worse by stigma, political indifference, and a terribly slow federal response. While the US government did not create AIDS, of course, its response helped shape how much suffering went ignored.
We've made remarkable progress, as you've heard. Work on a vaccine is now underway in many laboratories, as you've been told. This fiscal year, the federal government plans to spend $317 million on AIDS research. It's also important that America not reject those who have the disease, care for them with dignity and kindness.
Sounds pretty good, right? Throwing big financial weight behind a cure and urging Americans to be compassionate to those who were suffering. Unfortunately, this address wasn't delivered until 1987, nearly 6 years after the CDC's first public report of the condition. By the end of 1987, there were more than 50,000 cases and 40,000 deaths. Can you imagine if nobody responded to COVID until 2026? In the early days, AIDS was derided as a gay plague. Before being called HIV and AIDS, the disease was named GRID, Gay-Related Immune Deficiency Syndrome. Listen to the laughter during this White House press briefing in 1982.
It's known as gay plague. No, it is. I mean, it's a pretty serious thing that 1 in every 3 people that get this have died, and I wonder if the president is aware of it.
I don't have it. Are you? Do you?
You don't have it. Well, I'm relieved to hear that, Larry. In other words, the White House looks on this as a great joke.
The reputation for the condition didn't get better either. HIV started to spread amongst people sharing needles for drug use and among sex workers. Tragically, many ended up considering the disease a good thing, purifying the world of sin. Jerry Falwell, a famous religious leader and key political ally of Ronald Reagan, said, AIDS is not just God's punishment for homosexuals, it's God's punishment for the society that tolerates homosexuals. President Reagan changed his tune and began to take the illness more seriously when it impacted his longtime friend and Hollywood movie star, Rock Hudson. Seeing it up close really made the president feel the intensity of the illness, and 2 years after that, the full weight of the US government was finally put behind finding a cure. Despite being aware of these historical tragedies, recently RFK Jr.'s HHS has canceled hundreds of millions of dollars in federal grants and terminated over 230 HIV-related research grants. So all this time later, we're still working on it, after a regrettably late start and delays galore, but perhaps there is hope on the horizon. Look at this story I found on Ground News, the sponsor of today's video. Apparently, a 63-year-old Norwegian man in Oslo has achieved long-term HIV remission 5 years after receiving a stem cell transplant from his brother. There's still a lot of work ahead, but stories like this are encouraging. And thanks to Ground News, I not only learned so much about what happened in this story, but really how this story is being covered. You see, it's an app and website that combines the world's news all in one place, allowing me to compare coverage and verify sources of information. You can check it out using this QR code on screen. Swiping between headlines with context, like the funding of each source, and a factuality rating indicating potential subjectivity is really interesting because not only can I see every side of the story, but also better understand how these outlets are using language. With Ground News, I can see how the story was covered by 70 different outlets, and the words they use are no mistake. They're thoughtfully chosen to make us feel a certain way about a story. I don't know about you, but I like to know if someone who's trying to make me feel something about breaking news and why. Given today's media landscape, I think we need a transparency tool like this more than ever. Go to ground.news/doctor to subscribe for 40% off unlimited access to the same plan I use when you subscribe for yourself and send it as a gift. The link is down below. That's ground.news/doctor. All right, let's move on to the next story. The words 1909 Asexualization Act should send shivers down your spine, but more on that in a second. The United States has a long and ugly history with eugenics, which is the scientifically discredited belief that a population can be improved by controlling who is allowed to reproduce. This is literal Nazi territory. At various times throughout history, the United States has experimented with different forms of forced sterilization. Laws were passed that allowed medical professionals and state institutions to deem a person unfit to procreate and sterilize them through a variety of horrible means, from chemical castration to surprise hysterectomies. where a woman's uterus is removed without her consent. This was forced on a wide variety of folks, from the disabled, psychiatric patients, to Black people, Latinas, Native Americans, and any others deemed undesirable by those in power. And California was the worst offender in the US by passing this Asexualization Act. Between 1909 and 1979, this act, and many others, resulted in more than 20,000 Californians being sterilized, accounting for more than 1/3 of all officially recorded sterilizations nationwide. Across the country, more than 60,000 people were sterilized under these laws. This isn't ancient history either. Between 2006 and 2010, investigative reporting found that nearly 150 women incarcerated in California prisons received tubal ligations, what people often call getting their tubes tied. A later state audit reviewed 144 of those cases over an 8-year period and found that nearly 1/3 were performed without proper legal consent. At this point, the laws in the US that allow such horrifying behavior have mostly been repealed or rendered effectively useless, but the damage has already been done. Doctors and governments have taken advantage of countless numbers of our most vulnerable people, all in an effort to try and shape the genetic makeup of America to their liking. Horrible. What's so brutal about this next one is that not only was there an initial mistake, but also an overcorrection that led to even more suffering. Poliomyelitis, or polio for short, was ravaging the US in the early 1950s. Most people who get polio will experience no physical symptoms at all, but others won't be as lucky. Some will have flu-like symptoms that can clear up on their own, while others will develop meningitis, paralysis, and in the worst cases, death. You may have seen photos like this from back in the day of polio victims inside iron lungs. These were gigantic devices that could allow someone paralyzed by polio, often a child, to continue to breathe. It's a horrifying disease, and America was struggling. Dr. Jonas Salk was eventually successful in creating a safe and effective vaccine. And after years of testing and trials, it was finally time for mass production. 5 pharmaceutical companies were given the green light to manufacture it, including Cutter Labs in California. Unfortunately, Cutter made a catastrophic manufacturing error. You see, Salk's vaccine was inactivated, which means it used real pieces of the virus in his recipe, but the virus was 100% dead. But in some batches made by Cutter, the virus had not been properly inactivated. Live poliovirus made it into the vaccine, which meant, yes, some people developed immunity, while others came down with full-blown polio. Cutter's vaccine resulted in 40,000 cases of polio. It paralyzed over 150 people, most of them children. 10 died. You see, Jonas Salk's vaccine wasn't to blame. When properly made, the vaccine worked, and it helped drive polio cases down. But in the years that followed, the US government overcorrected by phasing out his vaccine and replacing it with the one from Dr. Albert Sabin. One vaccine is as good as the other, right? Well, not exactly. Sabin's was a live attenuated vaccine, meaning it contained a live but weakened poliovirus. It had major advantages. It was given by mouth, it was easier to distribute, and it was very effective at stopping the virus from spreading in communities. But there was a catch. In extremely rare cases, the weakened virus could mutate and cause paralysis. Yes, it was less than 1%, but who wants to gamble with those odds? The United States used the Sabin vaccine for the next 40 years. While it contributed to a heavy decline of the disease, every year a few people would get their polio vaccine and wind up contracting the disease itself. Jonas Salk never backed down from arguing that his inactivated vaccine was the safer choice, which it was, and finally in the 1990s, the US government changed its mind again and switched back to using Salk's vaccine exclusively. Today, thanks to the efforts of both the Salk and Sabin vaccines, polio has been isolated to just a few remote pockets in Asia and Africa. It's nearly been eradicated from Earth, but not without a few major bumps along the way. Smoking is bad for you. Look at me, a doctor warning against smoking. Way to go, Mike. Really sticking your neck out with that one, huh? Turns out doctors used to sing a different tune about smoking tobacco. Check this out.
What cigarette do you smoke? You'll be interested to know how the doctors of America answered that question. Tens of thousands of doctors. Doctors in all parts of the country, in every state of the Union. Doctors in every branch of medicine were asked,
What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?
in this nationwide survey of general practitioners, surgeons, throat specialists, diagnosticians, and so on, the brand named most was Camel.
Yes, according to this survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Try Camels yourself.
Pretty wild, right? To see doctors actually advocate for smoking. Cigarette advertising dominated American culture in the early and mid 20th century, with commercials like those for Camels to Lucky Strike claiming their toasting process made their cigarettes less irritating on the throat. Yeah. Lucky Strike urged women to reach for a Lucky instead of a sweet. Wink, wink, smoke our cigarettes and you'll be skinny. Gross. Highly respected medical journals like the New England Journal of Medicine and the Journal of the American Medical Association accepted big advertisements in their publications, and tobacco companies didn't just buy ad space. They also funded clinical studies designed to cast doubt on smoking's dangers, and the journals published them. They weren't just marketing cigarettes, but manufacturing biased research to make experts believe cigarettes weren't so bad. Now, while cigarette advertising has been significantly regulated off America's TVs and magazines, believe me when I tell you that there are no shortage of dangerously addictive companies coming to take their place. Gambling companies, I'm looking at you. Henrietta Lacks, a black woman from Maryland, died from complications associated with cervical cancer in 1951, but that's just the beginning of her story. During treatment, doctors biopsied her cancer cells, and upon closer inspection, they realized her cells behaved unusually. They multiplied at an incredible rate, doubling roughly every 20 to 24 hours, and under laboratory conditions, they can keep dividing again and again, making them the first widely used immortal human cell line. This made the cells extremely valuable for research purposes. A never-ending supply of cancer cells that could be used for tests, research, trials, and development of new treatments sounds like a researcher's dream. Her cells were distributed to labs across the globe. Jonas Salk even used them in developing the polio vaccine. What a great story, right? Just wait. About 20 years after Henrietta's death, scientists discovered that her cells had contaminated other cultures and labs around the world. To sort out the mess, they tracked down her family and asked for blood samples. If her cells were so valuable, maybe her family's would be too? There was just one problem. No one in Henrietta's family knew what the heck they were talking about. Henrietta's cells had been harvested and used around the world for 20 years without her permission. And they still are today. Look, while it's a positive that so much good has come from the research performed on her cells, I think we could also agree it's just not right to have this have happened without her or her family's permission. Since the dawn of time, pregnant women have struggled with morning sickness, or nausea associated with carrying a baby. In the 1950s, a new drug called thalidomide hit the market abroad. It was a tranquilizer that could help women sleep and treat morning sickness, allowing them to sail smoothly into motherhood. Felt like modern medicine had a win on their hands, until it was realized that it also caused birth defects in thousands of babies. It's unknown how many miscarriages and stillbirths thalidomide caused, but for the thousands of babies who survived through birth, many had severe injuries affecting their eyes, ears, internal organs, and nerves. Some were born with shortened or fully absent limbs, sometimes with hands or feet attached close to the body. A German pharmaceutical company, Chemie Grunenthal, had been selling the drug without a prescription in West Germany and raking in profits. Other companies licensed and marketed thalidomide around the world under dozens of different brand names. Countless families had their lives ruined. But interestingly enough, very few of those cases occurred in the US. Why? Well, the Food and Drug Administration refused to approve thalidomide thanks to a woman named Frances Oldham Kelsey. Richardson Merrill Pharmaceuticals, a US company hoping to sell the drug in America, submitted an application for FDA approval more than once, and Frances always said no, because they never submitted enough reliable safety data. Richardson Merrill was conducting their own safety studies and discovered disfigured fetuses in rats during animal testing. Shockingly, they kept it hidden from the FDA. Richardson Merrill kept pushing, but Frances stood firm. Who knows how many lives she saved by refusing to back down from a shady pharmaceutical company. President Kennedy actually awarded her the President's Award for Distinguished Federal Civilian Service in 1962. She's a hero. But she's also not alone. In this video, we looked at some of the darkest stains in the history of medicine. Widely corrupt, selfish, and unethical practices that harmed and killed millions. These are the stories that make some of my patients doubtful when we recommend a treatment, and keep many others from even coming to see me or any doctor in the first place. Sadly, it's this cynicism that drives people to the dark corners of the internet for healthcare, making them susceptible to the snake oil salesmen who really are trying to maximize their profits with smoke and mirrors, as they face no scrutiny and little to no liability. But it's also these mistakes that have led to massive reforms. Thalidomide led to a bolstering of the FDA. The Cutter incident improved the guardrails we have for testing and distributing new vaccines. The abuse of patients in the Tuskegee study and the theft of Henrietta Lacks cells helped affirm the notion of informed consent and bodily autonomy in healthcare. Smoking deaths have plummeted in the US in part because of strict advertising regulations. Polio is nearly eradicated, and we continue to make progress in the fight against HIV and AIDS. Medicine is not perfect. It never has been, and it never will be. Heck, this is why we always say we're practicing medicine, because we could always do better. But I can say quite confidently that the vast majority of people in healthcare, from the doctors and hospitals to the researchers and pharmaceutical companies to the officials and regulatory agencies, genuinely care about making you happier and healthier. There will be exceptions, which is why we must remain healthy skeptics, but I ask that you trust when we say first do no harm and the rest of our oath, we really do mean it. Oh, and I forgot to talk about the wildest one, the doctor who was basically murdered for trying to convince people that they should wash their hands in between patients. That story is truly unbelievable. Click here to check that out, and as always, stay happy and healthy.